Welcome to Cutoff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the producer and co-host, and Gen Genie Jr.
Gen Genie Jr.
Gen Genie?
Gen Genie.
Gen Genie, Gen Genie.
I'm changing the emphasis on the emphasis on where we put.
Why are you doing that to me?
Because it's fun.
It's hard enough for me to understand English, let alone when you start changing the emphasis on the syllables.
Yeah, I don't know why. That's because you're Bostish.
Boston.
Massachusetts.
It's funny. I still relate to home, but I've now been in Los Angeles longer than I was in Boston.
Yeah.
So, but you always relate to where you grew up and where you went to high school and all that.
Just listening to you talk right now,
Yes.
you sound nothing but Boston to me.
Really? Oh my God.
I mean, you don't have a strong accent, but I think it's just that.
It's my attitude.
Yes.
You know what?
You're very street.
As I told, there was a cashier at the Whole Foods, who
We're fancy like that.
who noticed my Boston Red Sox cap that I was wearing that day, simply because I was
That's
having
weird.
a bad hair day and had
Okay.
nothing to do with my allegiance to a team. But anyway, sometimes I forget I'm wearing it, and people go, "Hey, Boston!" I'm like, "What?"
Whatevs.
Anyway, he told me that he was from Boston as well, and I said, "Well, you could take the boy out of Boston, but you can't take the Boston out of the boy." And he's like, "Oh, that's nice. Well, would you like plastic or paper?"
That's hilarious. My husband says the same thing about me, only he's talking about trailer parks.
Oh.
Anyway.
Oh.
It's not as mean as it sounds, actually.
Really?
but
Because you didn't grow up in a trailer park.
I didn't, but yeah, let's not go any
Okay.
further with that. Okay, hey, how was your weekend?
You know what? I have something to talk about that's sort of DNA related. I watched a really good show on PBS called Mrs. Wilson. Do you know anything about
yes,
this?
I watched it myself.
Okay, so can we talk about that?
Yes, it's a true story.
That was what was
By
made
the by.
That's what made it so fascinating,
Yeah.
because you cannot make that stuff up.
So this is Ruth Wilson, the actress. This is her
Grandmother.
grandmother. She
grandfather.
played her grandmother.
Yes.
Right.
Which again, like that made it even more kind of meta, knowing that it was her family's story.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, folks, Mrs. Wilson, if you haven't watched it, and you should on demand because it's very good. It's part of Masterpiece Theater,
Masterpiece,
right?
yeah.
On PBS.
I love me some Masterpiece.
Me too. They do great work. But anyway, her husband dies in like 1962 or 63, and she's been married to him for over 20 years. She's got 2 kids, and when she dies, she finds out that he has like a whole other family that she didn't know about, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. But it turns out, not only was she married to a bigamist, but there were so many extended members of this family now.
It's so many, and it's hard to tell if he was pathological or sociopathic, because he did work for the Secret Service.
Right.
So that's where they met. So there's a confusion as to where is the line drawn. But he definitely was a bigamist.
But even with that, I can barely keep one life going. Can imagine having like another family somewhere?
No.
Even if you lied and said you traveled or whatever, like how do you keep that going?
Well,
and
it was the
remember, and
whole-
not call. I call people by the wrong name all the time. Can you imagine calling your
Yes.
husband the wrong name because
It's that whole Secret Service thing where they're like, I'm on a mission. I have to,
Right.
and I'm going to be out of. It's a great cover,
Right.
Especially if you actually do work for the Secret Service.
And this was all discovered before the whole DNA thing.
Yeah.
But it still speaks to what we're talking about
Absolutely.
about the secrets, the lies, and how when things come to the light,
What people
and
got away with. We're finding out so much about what people got away with.
Right.
Yeah.
But they found this out before they had DNA testing. But I loved at the end where they showed all of the family members, the
In the
real
same
people,
room.
not the actors, but like all of these extended family members that are still alive.
Yeah.
It was something else.
Yeah.
I highly
They all
recommend it.
eventually, after they worked through this, got to know each other, and now they're just one big happy polygamous family.
Well, again,
Ish.
they were sort of brought together under duress because they didn't,
Yeah.
they didn't know that this was going on.
Yeah.
But once they realized that there was nothing else they could do about it, they were related by blood. why not meet and
that's the healthiest thing you can do, because it's none of their faults. It's what somebody else did, and it's your circumstance. But that doesn't. But now you're related to these people. It doesn't hurt to get to know them. If you don't like them, then don't.
Right.
But give them a chance.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't hold a grudge against them.
It's not their fault.
Maybe if they had known about it and kept the secret, you could be a little more upset. But they didn't. Nobody seemed to know about anybody else, and that's what was so amazing to me.
He was masterful,
He was. But you know what I thought was the most interesting part? There's a scene. I think it was in the last part, because it's a 3-part series, folks. Where the mother of Mrs. Wilson says to her, he's a liar. I wouldn't believe anything. And I thought, wow, so there were clues, and that she just chose not to see them, I think. That's
another sociopath thing, is that they have a charm about them, or an ability to convince people of anything. And once they have you wrapped around their little finger, you ignore the signs, and people that aren't connected can see it, which is why they keep you isolated from other people.
Right. Exactly. Because, like you said, he worked for the Secret Service, or whatever the British equivalent is. And
I think it was MI1 then.
Yeah. They're up to 5 now, I believe.
I think 6.
Yes. Oh, really? It's like...
Oh, maybe not. Maybe that's like fictional from a TV movie.
Sidebar. I remember on All in the Family, when someone gives Edith a gift of Chanel No. 5 perfume, and she looks, she goes, "Oh, that's their highest number." Gotta love Edith.
I would like to know what numbers 1 through 4 smelled like.
Yeah. Probably not good, and that's why they arrived at number 5.
They stayed at number 5.
Yeah. It was probably the days before market research, where they didn't do market research and go, Yeah,
they just sold it, and if people didn't gag, then they figured it was good.
I just mean how they came up with the number, and I think people will like 5 better. It says that we tried 4 other things.
All right, now I need to know how they arrived at that name.
Yeah, exactly.
I will do the research.
Okay, of course you will. It'll be on a corrections corner in a week or so.
Yes. Speaking of corrections corner.
Oh, well, okay.
I have actually a clarification corner.
Clarification, even better.
This is involving last week's episode, in which we spoke extensively about family affair. More so than necessary, really.
I love that story. I listened to that podcast again after I edited it,
couldn't get enough
and
of
I
it.
just laughed. And I thought, I hope nobody calls us out on this, because some of it was seemingly disrespectful. But if you know us, folks, you know that it's all...
If you're still listening, I don't think it's going to bother you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't think of what it would have bothered people. But anyway.
Well, the family of Mrs. Beasley actually contacted me, and they were very upset.
Cease and desist, once again. All right, so here is the clarifications. Buffy actress Anissa Jones did die of an apparent overdose at a house party in Oceanside in 1976.
Okay, so she was still very young.
Yeah.
Right, because that show was on in the late 60s.
She was a teenager.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. She was at like a high school party.
Okay.
Brian Keith, you are correct, did commit suicide.
Yeah.
In 1997 in Malibu. He died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound just weeks after the suicide of his daughter, Daisy.
Oh, my God.
Isn't that awful?
So tragic.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
And finally, Mrs. Beasley did not have pigtails. She had a smart 70s crop.
I'm so glad, because, when you said that, I was thinking, maybe I just don't remember what her hair looked like, but it was...
I'd forgotten,
Yeah.
but I looked at it immediately. I'm like, oh, she's got Dorothy Hamill hair.
I love that you did your research and looked at a doll of Mrs. Beasley.
Oh, you obviously haven't been in the Facebook group today.
I have not.
I posted a picture of Mrs. Beasley and Anissa Jones, just for everybody to revel in her glory.
Brian Keith kind of looked like my dad a little bit, and he kind of spoke in the cadence of my father.
Really?
Yeah. It's strange.
That's weird.
I know.
I used to think Brian Keith was John Wayne.
Oh.
I would get confused between the two.
Sort of see that.
I used to think Brian Keith was the TV version of John Wayne. Oh. You know how they have the commercial version of known actors? Like there's like an actor in a commercial that looks freakishly like a celebrity?
Yes. Or they would have there'd be a famous movie, and then they would make a TV series of that movie, but they wouldn't get the original cast.
Right, because they wouldn't do TV back then.
Right.
Yeah.
So they'd get the TV version, the knockoff, basically.
Chelsea Handler was on TV this morning promoting her book.
Oh, yeah.
And just as a little side note, she revealed that she found out after her parents died that her father had a secret child while he was engaged to her mother. And she had 6 siblings, known siblings. One of them passed away very young, and then this other guy comes in, and yeah.
So she found this out through DNA testing,
I
or
don't know.
she didn't say?
I don't know. I could have looked it up, or I could have read her book, but I literally just saw it.
Well, good for Chelsea for
Chelsea.
For saying that and putting it out in public. I think there's so much, always there's this shame that's involved around all of these sort of secrets, and that you're trying to almost protect, if not the family, then the person who lied or had a secret,
Yeah.
And I think the more celebrities and people that are out, or just everyday people that are us.
That's
me
us.
talking about
people.
my stepdad and his
Right.
daughter that just found him.
Right.
There's no shame in it. At least not for me, and not for the people who had nothing to do with it. It just happened to be in their family.
Yeah. Yeah. I a lot of the cases that I work, or the people that I help, I look at their non-identifying information. One that I'm helping right now, I looked at her information given to her by the adoption agency, and the story is so sad. I wonder. I get that she wants her answers, but she already knows that it's not going to be good, just because of what they tell her. There was abusive, and they were abandoned,
Right.
and all this stuff. And she knows who the father is, and I've almost figured out who the mother is. But it's like, I get it. I get it that you still need the answer, and you still need to. And it's probably good because she's probably already worked through this stuff and processed this stuff, and just needs a name.
Right.
And
right.
If she's into genealogy, then to do her genealogy.
Right.
But yeah, it's really sad. Oftentimes you see really sad situations that people went through.
And you think, like, gosh, if there hadn't been so much shame involved or whatever, that and there didn't have to be, it could have been an entirely different outcome, right?
It was huge in the 60s and early 70s. It was a whole industry. It was a cottage industry, and they systematically bullied these young women into feeling shame and hiding. They wanted them to hide. So we have to think about that when we think about biological mothers, how sometimes they're difficult to get through to when you find them. And that's because they've lived with this shame that was instilled in them
Right.
at the time.
Yeah. And especially if you're if they were very young when this happened.
Yeah.
And when they found themselves pregnant and unmarried, and there was adults and doctors and nurses telling you, you better give this baby up because this is, you can't do this. And of course, maybe they could have, if they'd made a different choice.
They definitely could have. There were government programs that could help young single mothers that these agencies never told them about. They were never given all of the information of all of their options.
Right.
It was they omitted anything that could be positive for the keeping side. Anyway, should we take a break?
Yes, let's take a break.
Okay.
If you're enjoying Cutoff Genes, please subscribe, rate, and review. Now, back to Julie and me.
Okay, we're back.
Hello again.
Hello there. So David Minnick, who was our Storytime guest in last week's episode,
Yes.
Sent me a little message in the Facebook group that was enjoyable, and it's life-changing, frankly. And I'm going to share it with everybody. It's a little hack.
Ooh, life-changing. I love that.
It's a life-changing hack for Gen Genies. So,
How about Junior Gen Genies?
Them too.
Will it save my life as well?
Junior Gen Genies. Gen Genie Juniors. We need to hack that out. Hash that out. Not hack.
You can hack it out.
That's hawk.
Oh.
I guess it depends on what part of London you're from.
Oh, I guess you're going to take a hack, like you may take and like hack something off of me, like. Oh, my Lord.
Oh, it all went to hell in a handbasket. All right. So you know how we've all had those matches on Ancestry that doesn't have a tree and looks like they haven't logged in maybe years and just has a username that is like some kind of weird nickname.
Okay.
Not initials. Initials usually mean somebody, but that's not a username. It's just like an alias. But if it's a weird little name, here's a little trick to get their direct email address.
Oh, okay.
So you go into any of your trees and you go to sharing and you want to share that tree. You're pretending you want to share that tree with this person. And so it says you want to share by email or username. You say username. You click on username and you put that username, whatever that is, in the little
search box.
Thank you. Search box, and then click send. And now you have invited that person. Then you go to your sharing settings or something like that, and it tells you all the people that you have invited.
All right.
And it gives you the email of that person, of whoever that is, that message went to.
Even if they haven't accepted yet?
Yes. In fact, what I do is, because I usually don't want them to see my tree, so I'll go right there. I will see it. I will write down the email, and then I'll delete the invitation.
That sounds a little underhanded. I mean, I don't know. I don't use the program.
But
it
works.
Yeah.
It's not. It's something that is possible on the site, and it's
until Ancestry listens to this podcast and decides, "Ooh, that's a bug. We need to
I
make."
seriously doubt Ancestry listens to the
Ancestry,
podcast.
if you're listening, you better sponsor us.
Yeah. Well, and they're usually really. They're usually whatever that name is at whatever server you use.
Yes. Okay.
So, you could also do it by doing every server you can think of with that name in front of it and just send mass emails out, which, frankly, I've probably done before, and it didn't work. But
even if you went to I'll try one at MSN, I'll try one at Google or Gmail and all.
I usually go Hotmail or Gmail and leave it at that.
Yeah. Oh, you don't really expand.
Apparently not.
Outward, like there's iCloud and
I know. Yeah. I guess you could.
Some people are still using AOL addresses. I mean,
like me.
Oh, sorry. Oh my God, Julie, really?
Okay, my husband recently made me switch it up, but I still the AOL mail goes to the general mailbox now. But I've started using our Cutoff Jeans email as my main mail.
Okay,
but they're in the same. I've had that name for 25 years.
Isn't that crazy?
And I've lived with it, and I don't know. I pay for it, guys.
Do you remember the sound of the dial-up when you're yeah?
Of course I do.
And sometimes it would just hang up, and you'd have to try it again and try it again, just to get on AOL.
You know what though? I long for the patience that I had back then.
Well, because we didn't know better. We didn't expect something quickly.
Life is better then.
Was it?
Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, with every pro, there's a con.
Absolutely. And I think one of the downfalls of society right now is that we have instant gratification.
Oh, for
way
sure.
too much.
Yeah. And I mean, I expect, one of the things I love about having a cell phone is that you'll never, when you're late for something, you can always tell somebody, I'm running late. I'll be there. I'm stuck in traffic.
Yes, that's brilliant.
Whereas before,
or if you have kids,
But I remember, before that, it was so stressful. Like if you were going to be an hour late because of traffic, and you had no idea to find out or to contact somebody to let them know, and they were waiting for you at a certain spot, and it was very stressful. So that part is great. But I also the other side of that coin is you can be reached at any time of the day, no matter where you are, and people expect that they can reach you, and it's very hard to just shut it off.
Right.
And not be thinking, oh gosh, somebody's trying to reach me, or and people will be upset that they can't reach you.
Right.
I know a girl who breaks up with her boyfriends if they don't respond to a text within an hour.
That's insane.
I know. Well, she's pretty enough.
I would have no friends.
She's still pretty enough to be able to have enough boyfriends to keep that scam going. But I'll tell you, and I'm not going to mention her name in case she listens, but you know who you are, Gina.
That's what we call a callback to something that none of you guys heard because we talked about it off air. Okay. Okay. Getting back to DNA, a lot of people are asking about other places to upload their raw data, other databases. And I've talked a lot about, obviously, GEDmatch and FTDNA. And I may have mentioned MyHeritage before, but I'm going to mention it again because it's actually a pretty good resource, even though it's not been great for me personally. And maybe that's just because of the part of the world that I come from. The users are... I've not had a lot of luck with finding close relatives on it, is my point.
Oh, from Australia, you mean? Because of...
Well, actually, most of my relatives are from Australia, but they're more distant on that. Mm-hmm. But I haven't gotten anybody closer than like a third or fourth cousin on there. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What I want to tell you is
it's here. It may not be there, but
it's not there. So you can upload your raw DNA to MyHeritage for free. And when you do that, you get a complete list of matches, the ancestral names that they have listed that you have in common, and you can export the list of matches and you can contact them. So that's just another resource for you. For $29, it's a one-time fee. You have access to all the DNA analysis features like ethnicity estimates, chromosome browsers, the ability to view the trees if your matches have uploaded a tree, and a list of the matches that you share in common with them. So that's a good resource, guys. So I'm adding that to the raw data. All
those sites where you can upload.
I was trying to think of a catchier way to say it.
Is it similar to GEDmatch though, like in how you upload and everything?
Yes.
Or? Okay.
Yeah, it's similar. It's not. It's more consumer based.
Okay.
And it's prettier. But yeah, I think they're probably they're growing all the time, is what I'm being told, and I think they're European based.
Okay, good.
So,
well, it's always good to have another option.
Yeah.
But, I would also think that at some point you'd want everything to be in one place, which is why a lot of people will go to Ancestry because it's the biggest, right?
It's the biggest, and it has everything, except for a chromosome browser. But it has the ability to put multiple trees up there, the ability to search records, and the largest database. So for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, for sure. Are you ready for a break?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for listening to Cutoff Genes, the new podcast starring Julie Dixon Jackson.
All right, it's that time of the show where we have story time.
I love a good story.
Oh, me too.
Are you going to tell me a story today, Julie?
Yeah, I was going to tell you we have a special guest today to tell a story.
Who's that?
Me!
Why do I feel like I need to climb into my bed and have you tuck me in and sit on the end of the bed and read me the story?
Would you like some warm milk?
I would love it.
All right. Okay. So,
if you spike it with some rum or something good.
You'll sleep very well tonight.
Kahlua. Give me some Kahlua in it.
Okay, so this is a story that I've been sitting on, and I love it because it's one of those things where, as a genealogist, this is why you're a genealogist.
Okay.
Because you can't believe what you've just discovered. And it's not going to change your life, but it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of a lot of this for me is just I love a good story, right?
So well, me too, obviously.
Yeah.
Right. So after I found my paternal biological family, I, of course, built my tree up and out and back and as far as I could.
The real family.
Yes, paternal. Yes, on the paternal side.
Yes.
Right. So that was what? Almost 2 years ago.
Okay.
When I found them, a little later than that. Yeah.
Whatever.
So whatever. Who cares? So one of my second great grandmothers was Jane Chadwick, and she was from Wallasey, Cheshire. And her first husband was a man named John Robson. And they got married in Cheshire on the 26th of July, 1846. He was Scottish. He was from Dumfriesshire.
Oh. Everything's got a sure.
Sure, of course. Cheshire, Dumfries, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Americans tend to say Shire, Cheshire,
yeah.
and so
There's the Cheshire cat.
The Cheshire cat.
Cheshire cat.
See,
I said Cheshire cat.
Yeah, it's like we also say Buckingham Palace. It's Buckingham.
Oh my God!
You don't pronounce the ham. It's very American.
I always pronounce the ham. Because what do you say if you want a ham and cheese sandwich?
Well, it's a different thing. Hum and cheese.
I will just tell you that whenever I hear about the Cheshire Cat or Cheshire Cat, in my 5th grade play, we did a 5th grade play, we did Alice in Wonderland, and I'll never forget Christine Tardnico, I probably shouldn't say her last name, but Christine, I've already said it, Christine Tardnico was the Cheshire Cat. She did a fabulous job, and she sang the song, 'Twas Brillig, which is, of course, the Disney version of the Lewis Carroll. And so recently, I don't know why, I reached out to her on Facebook. We're Facebook friends. And I told her, I always think of her whenever I see the Cheshire Cat or whatever. And this is from 5th grade. Yeah. This is a long time ago. And she was like, oh, my God, Richard, do you know what? I sing that song to my kids all the time. And it's because I learned it back then. So it's funny how that stuff stays with you.
There are things that stick with you forever that you don't know why. You remember every word of something. And then other things that that completely go out.
And, of course, she loved that I remembered her in it as well.
Of course she did.
So anyway, I think what would have just happened here is I've gone off on a tangent because we were talking about your story, and somehow I made it all about me.
Somehow we made it about Alice in Wonderland in the 5th grade. Anyway, going back to Jane Chadwick and John Robson, they had 2 children, Agnes in 1850 and William in 1852. Now, when you do your research, when you're building things, and now we're in the mid-1850s, and at this point also I hadn't really learned how to access any of the records, for instance, in Cheshire. And most of it is like church records and what have you.
And most of those are they not digitized, or are they?
Yes, they are. They are, but not on Ancestry yet.
Okay.
That was when I discovered going to the Family History Library and losing myself there for hours. But that's another story. So I relied a lot on other trees. As I was just starting out, I was relying on a lot of people's trees as clues, so I was careful. But you're always going to make mistakes. And there were multiple trees with saying that he had died in 1853 in, it says, Caves au Languedoc-Roussillon, France. So it sounds like he died in a cave in France. So, and of course I Googled that, and there are actual caverns in this place in France that are like archaeological digs. And of course, my mind went to the 1851 census says he was a stonemason, so I'm trying to connect the two.
Right.
Maybe that's why he was there, and he died. Anyway, fast forward to about a year ago, and I connect. So the 2 children, Agnes and William, came to Australia with their mother after their father died. And then she proceeded to marry my second great-grandfather. And they grew up as stepchildren of his. One of them married, Agnes married somebody named Lethleen, who I have a lot of matches from that line too, because I'm connected to her.
Okay.
So I added the Lethleen wing to my tree and discovered a distant cousin who is, I guess, a great-great-grandson of Agnes. And we started talking, and he said, so do you know about John Robson? And I said, oh, yeah, he died in a cave, right? And he said, no. Go ahead and Google, he told me to Google, what was it? The fate of the Madagascar ship.
Wow, that sounds like
sounds. So I did. And let me tell you, this is crazy. This is what, so there is a story, there was a ship in Australia called the Madagascar.
How did this guy know about this?
He had done his research.
Wow, okay.
And he was in Australia, and a lot of this stuff I got from newspaper clippings, from newspaper stuff, because every few years somebody comes out and rewrites the story again, or say that they found some new evidence of something and try to come up with what really happened.
Well, then this must have been a big story. So
it was a huge story back then.
If it's been retold, because most stories,
exactly.
they're told once and it's forgotten.
Precisely. So I found this one newspaper article where I get most of the information from, and it's from 1873. And I particularly like this one because it pretty much breaks the whole story and also mentions my 3rd great-grandparents which is fun for me. And it goes like this. So in 1852, a Cornish gentleman emigrated to Australia with his wife and children, and he brought 3 servants with them. One of them was John Robson.
Okay.
So he had decided to go, and in the 1850s was the Australian gold rush, just like it was here, and everybody, was this huge, like everybody wanted to try their luck on the gold fields in Australia. So, and they would work for people in order to get transport to Australia, and then work for them like indentured servitude after.
Okay.
So they got to Australia, and the gentleman gave John Robson and the 2 other servants a tent to park, and I guess North Melbourne is which is a suburb of where I grew up.
Okay.
And to set up the tent and get prepared to go to the gold fields, which was 100 miles away. So he found out a few days later that not only did they put the tent up, but they were housing half of the crew of the ship that they had come over, who had all jumped ship, and because they wanted to try their luck in the gold fields as well.
Oh, wow. All right.
So they were all these people were living in this tent. The gentleman decides to let them take their leave. He wasn't going to need him anymore, and they weren't trustworthy. So he paid him off and said, off you go. You can go to the gold fields. I don't need you anymore, and I don't trust you.
Wow, that's quite a change.
Yes.
I wonder what happened in that tent. Somebody got robbed.
Yeah, who knows? I don't have the article in front of me, but it said something like, oh gosh, I can't even remember. It was very flowery the way it was presented.
How they did it at the
yes,
time.
Of course.
But basically, I didn't mean, how big was this tent?
How big could it have been that half the crew of the ship was in it?
Yeah.
So I think possibly there was an exaggeration. Anyway.
It might have been a whole campground and not just one tent.
Yeah, but why would he care if they were... anyway, let's stick with the subject.
Let sleeping dogs lie. Just like my dog lying there. Go on.
Sleeping. Okay, so...
It's no reflection on your story, though, Julie.
So in this story... By the way, this story was told by this reporter in 1872 by a gentleman that he met in a bar somewhere that said, I got a story for you that a lot of people don't know.
Wow.
So that's where this story comes from. And so
from a drunk person
from
in
a guy
bar.
in a bar, but he seemed to know a lot about it.
All right.
So that's why, and you'll see. Anyway, several months later, Robson returned to Melbourne, and he had 1,700 pounds worth of gold with him. And he left it at his former employer's house, and for some reason then went to a pub. The employer came home, saw it there, went and found him in the pub and said, take this out of here. I don't want to get murdered for this money. Apparently that was something very common back then. If you were carrying a lot of gold, people would murder you for it.
Oh, my God.
It was the Wild West, everybody.
Yeah.
So he took it back, and Robson, the employer saw Robson give it to the publican, which is the barkeeper, for safekeeping.
Oh, yeah, always trust the bartender. Here, bartender, would you hold my wallet? I'm going to the bathroom.
Hold my gold. I picture like this big sack with a dollar sign on it, like in cartoons.
Yeah, but except it was 1,700 pounds. I mean, that's a lot of weight. I mean,
no, 1,700 pounds worth of gold, meaning pounds, okay. British.
I'm thinking, what did he do? How did he even carry that, man? Like, that's a lot of weight. Oh, my God. That's hysterical. Okay. Stupid Richard. Okay.
I'm glad we clarified
Me
that
too.
one, because a lot of people may have been thinking that.
Maybe.
This is why I like you hair. All right. So he gave it to the publican and for safekeeping in the presence of the former employer. He said it belonged to him and his friends, the ones who were the former servants as well, that they had all gotten it in the gold fields. Okay. Around this same time, there had been an escort robbery, or what we knew of as like a stagecoach robbery back, in the movies where like a bunch of guys with masks over their mouths.
They had their own Jesse James.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like that.
Yeah.
And so the Madagascar had been scheduled to sail back to England, and the former employer was going to sail with his wife and children back to England. But because this escort robbery had taken place, they knew this ship was leaving the harbor in Melbourne, so they delayed the sailing, basically, of the Madagascar.
Okay.
And so that they could come aboard and arrest or look for and arrest these robbers, because they had a tip that they were on board.
Okay.
They found 3 of the robbers, and they were hanged. They found them on the ship, and they were hanged. But it was said that there was one more that they couldn't catch, that was probably still on the ship. This is what was said.
God, so much for a jury trial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what?
Mob justice.
And the gentleman employer, who was another person, apparently this source had revealed that he had spoken to the gentleman employer as well. He knew everybody.
He knew a little too much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. I just had a light bulb moment.
Well, really?
Okay. So the employer had embarked the ship with his wife and child. Then they had to disembark because they were delaying the sailing of the ship to catch these robbers.
And hang them.
Right.
Yeah.
While he was on board, he saw Robson, who said, "Yeah, me and my friends are sailing back. We struck gold." Mm-hmm. So he gets off the boat. His wife gets sick and dies within 3 days, and he ends up staying in Australia. So he didn't sail on the Madagascar. That's important to this, because so he was able to tell this story. So the ship sailed. It had 70,000 sovereigns and 60,000 ounces of gold. And it sailed and was never seen or heard from again. To this day, they don't know what happened to it.
Really?
Yes, and because it was laden with gold, it had this incredible cargo.
People are looking for it because they could still find
Exactly.
the gold, right? They want to find the shipwreck and go down and
Right.
get the gold. Yeah.
Right. So,
Maybe it's lost off the coast of Madagascar, which is the name of the ship.
there are different places where excavationists think they've found it. Like somebody found a bell somewhere once, and they thought that it was
the ship's bell.
Yeah, the ship's bell. Also, I think maybe the French thing, caves, Roussillon.
Yes.
Maybe they thought maybe somebody found some kind of wreckage
In the cave.
there, or like off that coast.
See, what I think what happened is the 3 guys that they hung, their ghosts came and haunted the ship and caused it to sink. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. It's a ghost story.
That end. No. Wait, but there's more.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so in 1857, this informant that we're talking to went to New Brighton, Cheshire, which is where my Chadwick family is from. And he visited the home of Mr. Chadwick, my 3rd great-grandfather, to ask him what happened, if he'd ever heard from Mr. Robson, his son-in-law. He was a well-to-do farmer, apparently, and he had been told that Robson had been hanged for the escort robbery. And then his wife, Marjorie, my 3rd mother, went upstairs and brought down a box that had a newspaper in it that they had received, as said, by some strange incident from America. That's what it says, which had an account of Robson's death, including his full name, place of birth, and most recent place of abode.
Okay.
So they were to believe that he had done it and he had been caught. But as far in Australia, he was not one of the men that they caught on the ship.
Okay.
And were not, and hanged, because those are recorded.
Right. So they hung the robbers, but not the Robson.
Nice.
Thank you.
Well played.
I don't suppose his first name is Rob. I'm Rob Robson.
John.
Give me your money.
John Robson. Yeah. So the informant, I'm going to look just at the article really fast because I thought this was interesting. The informant is well connected, is known, so he states, to the Bishop of Sydney and other gentlemen of position in this city, and he is ready to answer any questions at any time. The publication of the above in Australia and California, was also published in California, we hope helped to throw some light on the fate of those on board the ill-fated ship. The inference is to be drawn that this Robson had gone on board with his friend's gold, and afterwards had joined some of the desperate characters known to have been on board the Madagascar. They had then murdered the captain and passengers, plundered the ship, and afterwards destroyed her by fire or otherwise, so not a vestige of something could be discovered. It's blurry. Anyway,
but I'm a little lost. So you kill the captain, you kill all the passengers,
kill all the passengers,
and then you
take the gold, you plunder it, you take it, and then you get off the ship and you set it on fire.
But you get off the ship where? You're on the ocean.
Well, they probably went somewhere to some remote island.
Okay.
In Madagascar.
So you're telling me like that the Gilligan and Skipper
yes
are there with gold.
That is what I'm telling you.
Okay.
This is the inference, by the way, to be drawn.
Right.
That this journalist, I'm using air quotes, has surmised.
Okay.
I believe. Also, the probability is that some of the gang participators in the crime are still living and this is 1857. I'm sorry, 1872. And
that makes a difference.
Yes.
Because some of those people from 1872 could still be alive. No, I mean
vitamins and stuff.
But here's the thing: is back then, who knows what happened to that ship once it left port? You know, between then and the time it would have arrived in England. I mean, anything could happen, and there's no way to get word. Right? There was no
right.
Yeah, the Pony Express didn't exist on the ocean. They didn't have
the Seahorse Express. Oh, I hate myself for doing that.
Okay. I just picture Mrs. Howell from Gilligan's Island saying,
I don't care who you are, you're not my lovey.
No, I'm
doing
Mrs. Howell.
Oh, okay, fine.
Saying that she
That's
needs
funny
to
that
call.
you do Mrs. Howell and I do Mr. Howell.
I'm much more of Lovey than Thurston.
Yeah, fair enough.
Never mind. Go on with your story,
anyway,
Julie.
I want to get to the end of this. Probably the man Robson, fearing to be hanged, would not confess his participation in the crime, but procured a promise whilst ill that if he died, the advertisement of his death before mentioned should be inserted and a copy sent to England. So he is saying that he told the people that he knew, hey, I did this crime, but I don't want to confess to it. However, if I get caught or if I die, I want you to send this press release to this newspaper and make sure it's sent to my in-laws in Cheshire.
That's really strange. And that's a lot of forethought. Like, I can't imagine any situation where I would think, just please send this letter to my in-laws in case.
Because I don't want them mad at me.
Yeah. Even more than they already are.
Yes. So thus is the story of John Robson. Let me tell you that I think that journalists back then were allowed to use their imagination a little more than now.
Well, I mean, also, when they didn't have any real facts other than the ship left port and was never heard from again, they could pretty much make up whatever they wanted and nobody could prove otherwise.
That's true. But he is saying that because, this guy saw all these things, this guy that he was talking to, and the fact that this newspaper had come from America and recounted the death of him and said where he was from and his birth date and where he was living, that somebody knew something.
This is like one of those Agatha Christie mysteries, where they ask Hercule Poirot to go back and go, well, so this, this article came, but it came from America. It didn't come from Australia. And, he has to piece everything together. Mm-hmm. And I think perhaps this is you. You are going to be Miss Marple.
Do you realize that is probably the third time you have intimated that I'm Miss Marple?
At least. But, because some of these stories have this sort of mystery to them.
They all do.
Yeah, and here you are, 100 years plus. 150 years later trying to piece together, the murder of a bunch of... the murder. And the murderer is...
Poirot, wouldn't that be crazy?
Usually it's a member of your family because they all seem to come from be like rogues and thieves and horse thieves.
They were.
Didn't you have it wasn't a horse thief, it was like a
murderer.
a murderer. Didn't you have a mule thief or something, or
yeah.
a goat thief?
A goat thief,
Goat
but that
thief.
was from the Cummings, not my family.
Oh, okay.
Side that I originally thought was. But that goes to show that every family, especially back then, people were desperate, guys.
Yeah.
And people would do things and just out of necessity. And it was the Wild West. So we have to accept that some of our forebears did terrible things. That's no reflection on us today.
Except that we have it in us, in our DNA. Like I'm going to confess, I murdered a plate of goat cheese the other night at dinner. I just could not stop eating it. And I think maybe there was a goat thief in my history, and that's why I did that.
It was Solomon, the goat thief.
Solomon the goat thief.
I don't know how that came back to
it's
me
like
like
a
that.
character out of A Fiddler on the Roof.
Solomon the goat
Solomon.
thief.
Yeah, he was left on the cutting room floor when they were putting that script together. What about Solomon the goat thief? I'm sorry, sir, but you're you're fired from this.
But you still get
musical.
residuals. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay, so that's my story. I thought it was fascinating.
It's very interesting.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, well,
For me, it's awesome to see my third great grandparents that I know are my third great grandparents' names in print as witnesses.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I have two of those because with on the Fisher side, I have my second great grandmother whose brother killed his wife. If you recall, remember
Yes.
she was at the inquest.
I guess the only way to really piece together stories of your history is if you do come from a bunch of murderers and rogues, because that's the
They're
only
in the
way
papers.
that's the only way they're going to make the papers.
Well, that's true.
Our regular daily life doesn't get reported up
Yeah.
on, you know.
That's true.
On that note, Julie,
On that
I think
note-
we've come to the end of this episode number
We've
48.
come to the end of the episode.
In that case, I'm going to just tell everybody
Please do.
once again, I'm Richard Castle. Hello. And you can go to my website, richardcastle.com, and learn all about my songwriting and piano playing and musicals that I write. Or you could follow me on the Twitter @CastleSongs.
I am Julie Dixon Jackson. I am at Jules Jackson on Twitter. The podcast on Twitter is at Cutoff Jeans Podcast. We have a Facebook group called the Cutoff Jeans Podcast. You have to ask to join or you don't get in.
It's highly exclusive.
It's very exclusive. But hey, you get to see pictures of Mrs. Beasley.
Oh, I'm going there right after this. I got to see that.
Yeah, you should. Also, guys, if you are tired of hearing me tell stories, then tell me your story so that we can tell it on the show. Contact me at any of the addresses that I've already given you. Also, Jules Jackson at cutoffjeans.com is a good way to directly get in touch with me. And that's about it.
And
Reach out.
you could actually have Julie tell you in person or on the phone where your truth lies. And where is that, Julie?
Oh, yeah. The truth is in your jeans.